Today, I want to have another one of our more conversational videos, this time talking about the importance of shows like Hazbin Hotel and the concept of their Sinner-Sonas, or personas for the Helluverse for the normies tuning in. These are characters that people design that aren't modeled after themselves, but that fit within their various fandoms, such as the Helluverse. But with Hazbin Hotel, it encourages something a lot more healthy than the others that came before it, I think, and at a time where it's needed more so than ever before. My name is Deepcut, demons call me ImpCut, and let's talk about why people love to make their own characters in these shows, particularly in shows like Hazbin Hotel. Now, one of the reasons I would say the Helluverse is so popular is because of the idea it gives that you could exist in their world. And despite that meaning that your character is in hell, that's actually very appealing psychologically. The idea of inserting yourself as a character into an existing show is not new, as I've said, but the characters being in hell gives them extra layers to how they interpret themselves. Another great example of this trend is in Murder Drones, another internet web show popular with people who just love to avatarize themselves in different ways. Murder Drones focuses on robot characters, and with the way the plot is set up, any human can design a robot version of themselves using a robotic base model. All they have to do is add in their own clothes, their own wigs or hats and color designs, and feel that they have representation for themselves within the show. Even before the indie web era, this was popular with shows like Steven Universe, where fans could imagine themselves as an alien themed after any beautiful gem that they wanted. Now, even in a happy and healthy person, this self-insertion to a show can be very fun, but it does tend to appeal to people in particular who are not happy with their normal life. While anyone, as I've said, can enjoy the fantasy of these shows, it's people who struggle with family, school, or generally just the people around them who tend to find it as a sort of sanctuary, a safe space where you get to play, but instead of pretending to be one of the characters from the show, you get to pretend to be a version of yourself within the show, which allows you to transition out of playing and having more of a solid identity for yourself. In the Helluverse, this becomes extra introspective, as you are inserting a version of yourself into hell, with hell in the show, of course, just being a dramatization of what humans experience in real life. The whole point of Hazbin Hotel is that hell is just a version of Earth where you are immortal, unable to die and escape the tragic life you build for yourself through your own vices and addictions. Sinners were literally humans on Earth who died and then went to hell in the show, and thus it was easy to just imagine this as an extension of your own life. In the Helluverse, you could be a human in the background of one of IMP's missions on Earth, and then bam, you're dead and suddenly in hell. What makes being a sinner so appealing to the audience is that the sinners are a reflection more so of someone's internal self than their external self, and when it does reflect their external self, it's usually the relationship with that aspect of their physical self. Shows like Hazbin Hotel that offer these opportunities to avatarize yourself appeal to people for various reasons. But what's important about Hazbin Hotel is that it offers you the chance to reimagine yourself not just as something perhaps more fantastical than you are, but something that represents how you feel. The jumping of fans from one show to the next, from one character to another, appeals to people who just feel that their own body doesn't reflect who they are inside. These shows all give fans a chance to reflect on who they are inside, and combine it with these beautiful ideas of how that should manifest physically. Important in Hazbin Hotel, however, is the lore surrounding this process, which adds an extra layer of introspection. Each sinner takes on a unique form, and while family members can look similar to each other, it's often because of a theme that they share instead of just genetics like in real life. Angel's family tends to manifest as spider demons, it's said, because of his Italian mob family's web of crime. In artwork of Angel's father and brother, they seem to be darker and less vibrant than Angel, whose flamboyant personality influenced him to be a bit different from his father and brother, despite the other similarities that they shared in life. While sinners are able to think of themselves as looking cool or even beautiful, the way that Angel Dust does, the process also involves a curse detail about themselves that they now hate. In the case of Angel Dust, this is said to be his feet, which the pilot indicates some of his fans find attractive, but that he personally finds disgusting. Husk, meanwhile, gets a lot of his theme from his life as a Vegas magician, but the fact that he is a cat is apparently because the character hates cats, making it the perfect trait he could never get rid of for his curse in hell. With that in mind, while other shows allowed you to have this fantasy version of yourself that didn't have supposed physical flaws, Hazbin Hotel's Sinner-Sonas offered fans a chance to not reject their body or life as it was on Earth in favor of a fantasy one, but to personify the relationship they have with their body in the Sinner-Sona. Instead of erasing something about themselves that they might have grown to hate, mostly because other people have taught them to hate it, your Sinner-Sona could incorporate that in a way that the person imagines as more attractive, thanks to embellishments of the inner personality being represented on the outside. Instead of creating an avatar that hides a scar, a fan would emphasize that scar, with the rest of the design being a surreal demonic representation of that person's lifelong relationship with that scar. People could emphasize their weight or their teeth or anything that would generally make them feel insecure because of other people, and portray it in a way that says, this is who I really am. Not in that you are truly that drawn character, but that you are a real human personality that gives character to the supposed physical flaws that you were born with or developed over life. Outside of the character's design, the life of the character is also generally important to the Sinner in terms of how the fan sees their own life introspectively. Once again, turning to Angel, he appears to be estranged from his father and brother, who are still said to run their crime ring in hell. After Angel arrived, however, he chose to run off and do adult films working under Valentino, indicating he didn't have a safe place with his family that he could stay. Other characters like Husk or Nifty have really vague backstories, and were in many ways more inspiring than Angel's more detailed backstory that we had from behind-the-scenes interviews. Fans could infer so much about what Husk or Nifty may have done in their lives based off of their persona in hell, trying to figure out what sins they committed and what personal relationships they may have had. This exercise in detective work on the characters teaches fans how to apply that same logic to their own lives, to orchestrate this idea of what their life would look like in this fantasy version of hell. And this isn't just a fantasy of power and wealth, as most people don't choose to become an overlord or an elite demon. Instead, people often give themselves really low-level tragic characters trapped in dangerous and sadistic scenarios like Angel Dust himself, exploring metaphors for their own relationships, bonds, and struggles that they face in real life. And one thing I really think is important is the opportunity for play. Play is how kids learn to not want to play anymore, at least in the way we think of it. It's a series of practices that allow them to let go of play in its more simple forms because they feel confident being able to act sincerely in the world around them. To put it simply, by imagining themselves as more serious characters, they're able to see themselves as more serious people. They learn to grow into the role that they're playing and see the aspects of these stories that exist in their real life. It's also been observed in mice that not being able to properly play and have fun at the younger developmental ages leads to intense aggression in later years, and I feel like that is something we see all around us in human society. In a safe environment, play indicates that there isn't any threats or concerns that prevent an animal from playing. It means there are no constant attacks from other animals or an environment so harsh that it requires nothing but work and defense. Harsh environments require angrier and more wild animals to respond to the constant problems and threats, and this need for play seems to be even more important in a civilization where humans are all expected to act in a way that is rather formal compared to our more animal natures. I think a lot about the experiment one couple did where they tried to raise a baby ape with their own child, thinking that the adopted ape would end up being more intelligent than the average ape and adopt some of the socialization of the humans. But a few years in, they found it actually led to their own human child thinking it was more appropriate to act like an animal. All of this says that humans aren't necessarily meant to act as formal and composed as we are in today's society, and we're supposed to be a little bit more wild, and when given the idea that it's okay to be this way, we take it, whether it's modeled behavior with an ape or just the opportunity to play. Play serves as the sort of middle ground where we get to explore wild ideas and activities, but be more silly, while also slowly being taught to rein in that silliness and act more mature. From what I understand, as society becomes more safe, children have begun to develop into adults a bit more slowly. We tend to look younger than our parents and their parents did before them at our ages because of how much softer our society has become over time. But with that slower development also comes a prolonged interest in play compared to earlier generations, and this seems really obvious in the mainstream at this point. Our culture itself has evolved to such a degree that the idea of play is not irrelevant to adults anymore. Parents and kids are more likely to have shared interests than in earlier generations, with a lot of childhood media being adapted with more adult themes and creating this constant multi-leveled platform of intellectual properties that grow up with you, such as Marvel, DC, or Disney in general. In the early eras of video games, adults who didn't grow up with video games saw them as something just for kids. But adults who did grow up with video games just see it as something fun, something they can even do with their kids, but also having adult video games that aren't for them. The point is that we've created a lot of new outlets to explore this sort of imaginative play, and I think that the imaginary worlds that people self-insert into, like Hazbin Hotel, have become an extremely important part of this transitioning process from childhood to adulthood. For very young kids, play is very physical. It's about running around and just imagining the cool stuff surrounding you. But as kids become teenagers, play becomes a lot more psychological. By middle school, the kids who still like cartoons and anime and the like tend to imagine themselves and their friends as their favorite characters while in class. They can still pay attention and do their homework, but they simply indulge each other with this idea that they are someone else. It becomes just a different theme to make jokes based on what they are actually doing in class, clashing the absurdity of doing math in Mrs. Finster's class with pretending that you're just Angel Dust and Alistair, two demons who just happen to be in this school. For older fans, this transition is more so online. Online offers this very safe place for play where you can create customizable images of your character to help express your story with other people, all role-playing their own characters as well. No one has to know what you really look like or what your life is really like, but you can just go to forums or Discord channels and act out as your character with people who are discussing the same show, giving constant opportunities to weigh in on what happened in the shows as someone who supposedly lives in that world. These online communities allow a level of play that is essentially entirely psychological. No actual physical play or toys or anything like that, just someone imagining themselves differently. They're practically being a writer, but in a more interactive way, with other people also writing their own stories, and all of them slowly developing themselves more so as a conversation than some sort of project with an end goal that has to end in some sort of animation or comic or some sort of finished book. A fun aspect of what I would call VivziePop's meta lore is that her characters can be said to have something of a base design inherent to her style. This is great for fans who aren't as good at designing characters from scratch. Sinners can be entirely unique designs that just look vaguely like VivziePop's style, but most of the characters provide a sort of default style that you can customize to make something a bit more unique. Angel, for instance, I would say is one of the base defaults in the VivziePop metaverse. This goes beyond the similarities he could share with his family, but you can also see characters that are reminiscent not of him, but of his base in other projects such as VivziePop's short film Timber. This was such a cute and fun animated film that involves this cool purplish character, who I always felt looked a lot like Angel Dust, while still being very unique. It's not just the one eye or the ears or the color differences, but he comes off as a completely different character. He just happens to have this sort of same base model for inspiration. In the background of the same short from 10 years ago, you can see birds that are reminiscent of the Goetia birds in the Helluverse, or bird demons in general in Vivzie's work. Some people act like this is the most horrifying thing on the planet, which I do not understand. A lot of shows basically just have one base model for their characters, sometimes two just so that they're separate genders, especially in anime, and shows that try so hard to get every single character to look like a different style just feel weird to me, and often are very ugly. Part of what makes these various fandoms a place where fans actually congregate is that there's a sort of unique meta lore that the world has to it. These sort of recurring patterns that are more so an aspect of its meta lore. And for Helluverse fans, that makes these sort of baseline models to imagine themselves off of, with still having a character so unique that they can often spin it off into their own worlds. There is of course also the native species of demons. These demons allowed a new way for people to interpret themselves in the Helluverse, with not just base models to take inspiration from, but categorical species. But we'll be doing a separate video on that later, so subscribe so you don't miss it. In the meantime, let me know about your Sinner-Sonas, their stories, and how you came up with them in the comments down below. We tend to get at least one of these comments in every other video or so, and it's always great to hear how fans are kind of looking for lore to try and make their characters feel realistic to the world. See you guys next time.
Well, 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 if it isn't my arch rival, Racer Rabbit. Shady the Bat, you're here for the magic crystal as well?
Careful, Racer! He almost beat you last time.
I guess we'll have no choice but to battle till the very end, our hands all over each other. No homo. There is no homo that I fear. Well then, may the best homo win!
Wait, what did you say?